And we are now live.
Yep. Okay, we're back. It's 10 minutes till 2. So who do we have in the waiting room electronically, or who's available?
Diane Bothfeld just joined the call.
Okay, and that's only Diane. We don't have Abby or Amy yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
That's on a fairground?
This is agricultural fair,
I thought we did that.
competitive grants. It may be that the chair wanted to give me something to do. Didn't trust me with anything else. Anyway, Diane, welcome. You know the committee, don't you?
I do. Good afternoon, Senator.
Good afternoon. So we'd like to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Thank you very much for inviting us in. I'm not sure if my colleagues were able to join earlier or not. Hopefully they'll join soon. So I will say a few things while we're waiting for them. We thank you very much for continuing the funding for the agricultural fairs and field days. That's in section 5, building community grants. We requested 300,000 and that has been maintained in the first version coming in from the House, and we do support that and are pleased that that's in the budget. And that is, oh, pardon me, excuse me, FY23, oh boy, 2.1 million, pardon me. Whoops, I'm not reading your spreadsheet wrong. Pardon me, $300,000. We're good. I said the right number the first time. Thank you. Sorry for that confusion. So thank you for the support of the agricultural fairs and field days. Added amount of 300,000 in the capital bill. That's section 5 on your spreadsheet. That language is not within the bill H739, but since it's level funding, the bill H739, I think documents changes to what was proposed. So if you need the line item, it is line number 54, Agriculture Fair Capital Projects Competitive Grants Program, level funded or meeting the ask of the 300,000. So thank you very much for that. The other question, and I would love to have my colleagues join as soon as they can, because this is not my area of expertise, but the Eastern States building in West Springfield, Massachusetts is certainly in need of repairs and upgrades. And that was adjusted, the amount was adjusted in H739 from a request of $350,000 for FY23 to 1.4 million. In the capital bill. That does go to the Department of Buildings and General Services, but the Agency of Agriculture works closely with Eastern States works closely with BGS on that building at Eastern States. We've had several audits of the building, several issues with the local building inspector going through that building in West Springfield, Massachusetts, and certainly it is in need of repair. Now, I really wish my colleagues were here because I've exhausted everything I know at that point. So I know that they expect to come on at 2, so hopefully they'll be here soon.
Yeah, let me make clear. So the Eastern States is not in your budget, that's BGS?
Correct.
Okay. Why is that? I mean, it is a fair.
It is a fair and a field day, but it's about the building. And BGS manages buildings in Vermont as well as those located outside of Vermont.
And did we ever clear up Senator Benning's question as to whether or not you're in Vermont or Massachusetts when you're in the building? I'm pretty sure you're in Massachusetts, but he thought maybe it was like an
I believe there's some language somewhere about sovereign territory, but the state of Massachusetts certainly is not paying for the building. And so we own the property. That is, I don't have that answer. And I see a hand waving behind you.
May I join?
Oh, yeah.
Eric Philcorn, BGS. It is a bit like the Vatican, but we would still have to hire Italian electricians.
Okay.
The Romans reign supreme.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips.
Of course.
So, you want to speak for BGS about the Eastern States?
I could add a bit if you need me to.
Sure.
Yes, just that we have two distinct projects outlined there. One is the general physical deterioration of the building, scraping paint, fixing up the outside, getting electrical code up to date, and just the backbone of the building. And then the other piece of the project is more of a reimagining of the space. You know, our Welcome Center down in Guilford.
Yeah,
You get there and you know you're in Vermont. We want to make sure people know that they're in Vermont when they go to the Big E. Some of the other state buildings are more corporate. And so this is almost like reimagining a classroom like you were talking about the other day, but this is for the sake of setting it up, also setting it up in a way so that as vendors change over the years and you get one maple creamy guy and one bread guy or whatever, it's still within the same framework and it's a little more modular. So that's it. It's the long-term good health of a very important tourism and recruitment piece.
Senator Muzzle.
One of the things I'm concerned about, and I discussed it with Ron before a month or so ago, we had those folks in, but the vendors, if we're gonna upgrade the building, spend $2 million or $1.3 million, I wanna know what the system is for collecting our percentage. That concerns me a lot, because I know they're very successful there. Every vendor is very successful, which is great. I don't think we have enough controls on how much our share that we're receiving. And they all voice their concern how well they're doing there, which is great news. But I want to know, if we're going to spend this kind of money, what is our return from the vendors? Right
So
now,
we do.
yes, go ahead. Maybe you can help me.
Yep. So Senator, each vendor has a contract with an agreement of a percentage of their sales coming to the agency. We certainly did not see, it is never enough to meet 1.4 million in repairs. It never is. I'm going to open our budget presentation, and this, we were asked in our overall budget presentation, what was the impact of COVID, and to give a specific, and we utilized the numbers from the Eastern States exhibition. I'm not going to share my screen. I can certainly send this to Alex, but in FY19, so fiscal year 19, September 2020. So no, excuse me. I love fiscal years. Before COVID, September 2019, the Big E brought in $221,433. That's what's generated from those percentages, from those contracts.
Yeah, but my question is, how is that derived? Do they say what they sell? It's an honor system?
They have to provide us sales records, and we have a contract with them with a percentage based on their sales. So yes, we know how many people go. We have an estimate from the Big E, how many people are on site. We get an estimate of how many have been through our building, and we try to match up all the numbers. But if somebody is telling us they got $10 for 17 days, I mean, we try to do the reasonableness of the numbers, but have we got an exact tracking every day? Probably not.
So it is back on the honor system, because they tell you what they sell per day. If they take in $10,000 per day, they could tell you 7 or 6.
We would check for reasonableness, but as far as I know, we have no electronic system for the whole, it's not a point of sale system for the whole grouping. I mean, we certainly could invest in one, I suppose, but no, they all are doing their own accounting. That is true.
We at the Champlain Valley Fair changed ride vendors, and we put it in an accountability system. The first year we picked up $80,000 more by documenting every ticket that was sold. $80,000 on the same revenue as the year before. So I'm curious. I don't mind spending the money, but I want to know what our return is, because I understand you haven't raised the rates in 3 years. Is that correct?
Well, it is also a cost for these businesses to stay in West Springfield for 17 days and have their employees there. So we're trying to make a balance of promoting Vermont, getting money out of them. And even if we could get more money, we'd still only be around 200 to maybe we could get to 300,000, which isn't enough to
I'm not saying it's
invest
enough.
in the building.
I'm trying to find, every vendor we had on at the last meeting was more than pleased with their sales. So they're not hurting. And what happens, they raise their prices like we're all doing. We have to raise our prices as the product goes up. I'm just looking for some sort of return. I know we're not going to get the full amount to pay off the debt of $1,300,000. I don't think we're doing enough on the side of what exactly should we be receiving. I don't want to receive more, but I want to receive exactly what that sale is per day. And I don't sense I'm getting that right now.
And so I don't have a lot of experience in how to collect that. What was implemented at Champlain Valley?
We're talking about the rides. The rides were changed on ticket sales, not cash, on ticket sales. And every day it's accounted exactly to the penny. And I don't know what would be done on food, but there's a big area there. And it also is a concern at a lot of fairs on how they collect their money on percentages. We're hoping everybody's 100% honest and send in exactly, but we're talking about the cash flow, most of them are cash, and we're also talking about the sales tax, rooms and meals tax, which is another 9%. So there's a big difference there between what they could report or do report. That's all I'm saying. I'm trying to find out a happy balance here where we make sure we get every nickel that's deserved to us. I don't want to overcharge them, but on the other hand, I want to make sure we're getting what we get.
All right. Well, I'm glad to see that my colleague Abby Willard has joined, and she may be able to shine some other light on this. Abby, the question is, how do we verify and collect the percentage from our contracts, percentage on sales for vendors who are at the Big E?
Hi, good afternoon all. Abby Willard, Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. So the Agency of Agriculture collects daily sales data from each vendor during each of the days that they're at the 17-day fair of the Big E. So some vendors are there every single day, and so they share sales data every day. Other vendors are there for a portion of the event, and they only share sales data on those days. So
What did they show you for sales data?
They just give us a figure.
Oh, so they don't show you documentation of every sale that was made.
They do not.
So it is the honor system.
I think a bit. I think we probably have the recourse to ask them to prove it if for some reason we're not feeling that the sales data that they're showing is matching with the business and the flow and the occupancy in the building that we observe for that day. So we track it every day and compare every day of each year to the same day of the previous year. So our staff is sort of making calculations each day of the fair of like how vendors are faring. And when we're seeing a differentiation across years or between vendors, then that's where our staff have those conversations. So they might go down to a new vendor whose sales look really low and talk to them about product placement or other ways that they may be able to boost sales. Or if we see that an established vendor, their sales are way down on that day in comparison to every other Monday of the fair in previous years, then we go and have a conversation with them to see if they're understaffed or they have different products or for some reason their sales are not matching what we anticipate. So I feel like our coverage of this question, Senator Mazza, is that we're at least checking in every day, and when there are any red flag days or vendors, we're following through with them.
But there's no way of checking. You can ask them, but they can justify anything. They can say there was a slow day, it was a rainy day, it's we didn't sell much. So okay, I'm not satisfied, but that's the way it is. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I guess I would say again, if we suspected something that wasn't aligning with, again, the business or the traffic or the amount of vendors that we've seen at their booth that day, I think we would have a conversation with that vendor. So again, I feel that's the coverage that we have, is that if we're feeling like the reported sales is not aligning with what we're observing for commerce activity of that vendor for the day, we have a recourse to ask for more documentation. I will be honest, I'm not sure that we've ever done that. And that sort of speaks to the level of relationship and discourse that we have with each of the vendors. They also sign a contract with the agency that says that they'll provide daily sales data and that there'll be an accurate representation of their sales for that day. So I think they also recognize that while we're not maybe, running the cash register for them, they've signed an agreement that they're going to be honest and demonstrate integrity.
In the last 3 years, how much have you received per year versus each year?
So I have 19 and 21 in front of me. We didn't have any 20 data because the event didn't happen in 2020, but I'd have to engage one of my colleagues to get 2018 data. But for 2019, the total building sales of the Big E that year was $1,973,000. We take a 12% commission sales. And so the commissions collected in 2019 was $236,769 and change. And then in 2020, I'm sorry.
Well, that rate hasn't gone up in how many years?
We did change it. I can't remember, Senator, what year it was. Maybe 4 years ago, we did increase it. We have the highest commission rate of sales of any other building on the Avenue of States. Other states do a flat rate, and then they charge vendors a portion of other costs, like the cost of propane or electricity use in the building. And we are one of few that elect to do it as a percentage of sales. And I think we were at maybe even 10%. I'd have to look back to see what we were historically, but up to 12% was an increase a few years ago. And then
I didn't mean to interrupt, I'm sorry.
that's okay. I just wanted to give you the 2021 sales and commissions just in comparison. So the total building sales in 2021 was $964,923. So about $1 million less in economic activity in the building in the year of 2021. And the commissions that were collected in 2021 was $115,790.
And we paid utilities, I heard you say? We pay the gas, the
We do.
lights?
Yeah.
Why do we pay all the utilities?
Well, because we own the building, sir. So we are responsible for all the grounds and maintenance. We pay for all the utilities and costs to maintain the building throughout the year.
So if a person doesn't use propane or gasoline or gas, they pay the same rate as someone that does?
Oh, you mean the vendor? Yeah.
How does that balance out? If I have a creaming machine and I don't use gas, and I have a fryer and I use propane, doesn't that make a big difference?
I can't tell you what our annual kind of propane bill is per year.
It's $5 a gallon, so it's going to be very, very high. That doesn't balance out if you furnish propane or gas for fryers and grills, and you don't do it for someone that sells other products. It doesn't seem very fair, but.
Yeah, I'd have to get the answer to that question for you. I think most of our food vendors are using some sort of, electrical or gas equipment. So that, that puts them probably at about on par with one another. I think you make a good point for those folks that aren't cooking or preparing anything or warming anything up, but just have wine or dry goods or other craft items where they're not using any of those services. So, but I'm sorry, I don't have that figure.
You think you'd have a reasonable cost of what it costs to own the building for a year?
Mhm.
Then you take your sales and then you come up with your percentage roughly based on that. Hey, we do about $2 million a year in sales, costs us $300,000 to run, so we need 15% of all sales, and then you can range it based on what they use. But it reminds me when I became treasurer of the local hockey association and we were charging $1 for hot dogs, and I immediately look at it and I go, we're losing money on every hot dog. And they go, what do you mean? I go, well, the hot dog costs 80 cents, the bun's 20, we're already at our buck. And then people didn't realize we're losing 50 cents on every hot dog we sell.
Mr. Chairman, one of the nice things about this project to reconfigure the interior is the option. Right now, like the electrical panels are daisy chained. There's no untangling any of this. And so it's probably with the current physical plant, a lot easier to just charge a flat rate. But as we upgrade the equipment, there might be the opportunity to meter usage at the different stations and things like that. So we may be able to get closer to what you're talking
We gotta
about.
have a plan here.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna score 1.3 million if I don't have a plan in front of me what the return is somewhat. To me, it's very vague.
And gentlemen, I would like to add the fact that out of those sales is funding a position at the position or the travel for our staff to go down there and staff the building, as well as the operations of that building when it's open. So we also have to add in custodial, security, et cetera. So we can certainly get you the operating money, but this is the investment. So certainly the building inspector was not very patient on what needs to be done for that building. There's some structural things that are very concerning. So we can certainly get you a plan for the building, its operation, but this is the investment in the building itself, and it is it's in need of investment.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say, senators, that kind of look at what we receive in revenue or in commission sales and what the annual operating cost of the building has been taken into consideration. And while I don't have those numbers in front of me, I can tell you that we're not losing money every year on the Big E. So again, we haven't had a lot of variation in those costs, but we have done that assessment and that evaluation. But I'm happy to share it with the committee if you're interested.
Senator Eccles?
So listening to what Senator Mazza and Senator Parent have asked, and it just seems like the biggest part of the benefit is going to the vendors versus actually coming back to the state of Vermont. And I know all the vendors who were there are very, very happy. They spoke highly of what this one event did to their business. I mean, it just put them on the map and then some, and just made them a lot of money, which I want them to make a lot of money. I think the thing that's just disappointing here, and I'm just going to sum it up in a simple little way, is just the business model that we have moving forward. It's just not a good model at all. We have no idea whether we can make money, whether we can lose money, or even any part about that. I agree with Senator Mazza. Before I can support 1.3 or 1.4 million, I don't care what the building does. I don't care what it does, but I just like to see it run as a business. I'd like to, if we are going to lose money, I'm fine with that. But I want to know how we lost money. I want to know where we lost money. I want to know all the ins and outs of where it's supposed to be, and then I can plan accordingly. Like I can say, hey, but as of when it stands right now, I really don't see what it does for the state of Vermont, other than for the vendors who are there selling somewhat Vermont-based products. And everybody says the Big E is wonderful, and I want to believe that, but I'd like to see just a lot better business model than what we have, and I hope that we can get to that.
I wonder if the committee would agree with me that there really are two separate issues, one of which is maintaining and upgrading the capital investment in a building, and the other being the running of a program in that building. And I just
We tie together.
well,
Tie together because we're investing money. We're investing 1.3 million. We want another return on that investment.
yeah, but I'm thinking that right now you got a building deteriorating in front of us
We
at
have
this
to
time.
I agree.
Okay, because in terms of the running of the operation, there are a lot of events I go to where people line up and they buy a whole pile of tickets. And at the various vendors, they don't pay with cash, they pay with tickets. And then the vendors cash in those tickets for cash at the end of the event. Would that work? Or is that worth looking at as a possibility?
100% participation. Yep.
Is that, I'm asking the witnesses, would that something you'd look at?
So I'm sorry, Senator, will you repeat again? You're asking if vendors would show cash receipts?
No.
Is that what you were?
No, there are events. We got an election year coming up. I'm gonna go to dozens of these events this summer and fall. And when you get there, you buy tickets. And then when you're at the event, you're not paying with cash, you're paying with tickets. A hot dog is 20 tickets, a ride is however many.
They do that on rides now.
Yeah, and then at the end of it all, the vendor takes all the tickets and cashes them in. It's a way of.
It's what we do at our farmer's market because we, the vendors can't take, SNAP, but we have a system where people buy tokens from the town with their SNAP benefits and they go give them to the vendor and then we cash out at the end of the night.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'm curious, the system that the Champlain Valley Exposition uses for their accountability, is that like taking reports out of credit card swipes or?
You buy the tickets for the rides. I'm not sucking.
Oh, why do, yeah, oh,
You buy
okay.
the tickets for the rides, then you go to the ride with your tickets, 5
Right.
tickets on a ride. So every ticket has to match up exactly what they take in for tickets, matches up, because they're all paid for.
Right, but you can't buy a bloomin' onion with a ticket,
No,
right?
I'm not
That's-
saying
yeah.
that.
Okay,
And most fairs don't. But on the other hand, we don't invest the 1.3 million in the Champlain Valley Fair or other fairs. We give them an appropriation every year, a stipend, but they have to account what they build with it. That's all.
And some of it's you buy a blooming onion with the tickets.
Yes. Oh, you could, you could
Yeah.
do that. And I think that's the future because let me tell you, the honor system, I'm not saying anybody's dishonest, but you have no accountability whatsoever. No way.
I'll take cash, one for me, one for you.
We don't know.
Count half, count it.
I know, I mean,
They don't
that's,
take credit cards, they take cash.
Yeah, we-
Yeah.
we run the Cochrane ski sale on the square now and all the vendors, all their stuff gets scanned by our system and then we pay them out at the end. So, you know, there are lots of ways to do this.
It's
and-
an issue with the
Yeah.
fairs too, I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's an
It
issue.
would actually be interesting to like run our own checkout separate from the vendors, so like at like the exit door. I don't
A
know,
parallel scan.
And then you pay the vendor back and there.
But again, I mean, I do get that these issues are connected, but I think they're not the same issue. We own, the state owns a capital investment. We own a building and it's in ill repair, it needs to be fixed up.
The chair took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, Senator, I would agree. And I feel like I appreciate that these are two separate issues. And I love the questions coming from the committee about how to ensure that we're running the Vermont building as a viable business. And I think that we can demonstrate that to you easily. I just don't happen to have that information prepared for today. I think, though, we do have to take into consideration that we do own this building in Massachusetts. We do have it open to the public, and we have a responsibility to ensure that it's maintained as a safe space for people to walk into and around and spend time in as vendors and staff. So many of the maintenance efforts that are being proposed for this coming year and into the future are about basic health and safety and major maintenance requirements for just basic operation and functionality of the space.
Not asking for anything more than exactly what our percentage is of exactly the amount taken in. We're not asking for anything more or less. If they take in $1,000 and they owe us 20%, we want to make sure we get the 20%, not 18, not 16, not 15, 20%. And we don't have a system in place, as I understand it, to do that. The obligation to the building is fine with me, but I also want to make sure we get a fair return on what we're putting into the building. That's all we're asking for.
I understand your question. And as I've said, I've shared with you the process and the relationship that we have with vendors to collect daily sales information. And it may not meet kind of the ideal standard that you're asking for. And I'm happy to have our team look at it again and think about ways that they could do that differently. But I am not overly concerned about the integrity of the data coming from the vendors to us on a daily basis. But I'm more than happy to consider and have our team think through other ways that they could still systematically collect information from vendors about what their sales are.
If you were running for profit, you would have a different outlook. But because it's a state facility, it's gonna be funded one way or the other. And like I said, 14%, why isn't it 15? Why isn't it 16? I don't know.
And I had one vendor tell me offline that they made $80,000 down there. That's what they made.
Yeah.
So they made $80,000, one vendor. So the numbers just don't add up. I mean, we have a multiple amount of vendors down there. We had one that was telling me that was an integral part of their business. They made $80,000. They didn't say they took in $80,000. They made $80,000. So if we took in a couple $100,000, and one vendor themselves made $80,000, it doesn't take long to do the math to figure out that there's something, the numbers aren't adding up. So I do have
Sure,
a
I would
problem.
say
I do have a
that-
problem with the formula.
So I would say that in the case of if a vendor made, I mean, I think how much money they made, I'm not sure that I can speak to how they calculated that. They may, if they're talking about what they received in sales, they still have
They
to
said
pay.
they made $80,000. They were there for 17 days. They made $80,000 after expense.
Sorry, I heard what you said. I'm just saying, I don't know if that means that they had $80,000 in sales, or that was $80,000 after they paid the commission, or that's $80,000 after they paid their staff, covered the cost of gross inputs and their hotel and their travel and all the other expenses to be able to be there at the event. So I think there's just a little bit more information that we would need to know what that means that they made $80,000. What I can tell you is that if they had $90,000 in sales, then they would have paid the state of Vermont 12% of that. So $10,000, or I can't do the math that quickly, but $12,000 in commission sales.
Here's what I'm saying. We have members of the committee who are not happy with how the operation accounts for income and accounts for whether or not the state is getting its fair share. I think that's a valid question. I think it should be explored, and what I'm hearing from the witnesses is that you're willing to explore it and to continue that examination, okay? Meanwhile, there is the question of the taxpayers' capital investment. The people of Vermont own a building that needs repair. So what I would, if I were a committee of one, I would say focus in right now on the repair, with the understanding that that doesn't end the discussion of the operation. Everybody happy?
No, that's right. Go ahead.
Can you live with that?
No.
All right.
Maybe we put something in language so that they got to come back with a report.
Some changes, and I'm not gonna support it, I just can't. I don't know enough about it. But look, come back.
So Senator Mazza, the investment in the building of the 1.4 million, when you want to know, we can certainly provide you more data, but do you want the vendor amount to support that type of, how far do you want us to go on the vendor amount? I mean, we could, if we're trying to get money from the vendors to support all the building maintenance, everything, then
No.
that percentage
You're
is
missing-
totally
you're
going to
missing the whole
change.
point. You're missing the whole point. I just want to find out the accountability of what they're paying us. You're missing,
Okay.
I'm not looking
Nope,
for the
nope.
return of a 50% profit. I want to know how accurate that they're paying
Okay.
for what they're doing. That's it.
Okay. We'll provide as much data as we can, and we'll also provide a potential plan to change it. I mean, Mr. Philcorn from BGS talked about everybody using a electronic square. We can mandate that in our contracts, that we go electronic. You have to do it this way or you don't go. So we could certainly, there are other methods that we could implement that will have an impact on the vendors. And you may visit from them next year and they say, I couldn't go because they told me I had to do the electronic square thing on my laptop and I don't know how to do that and I don't want to make that investment. So there are ways to get there and I think we can do that and we'll get to that
We'll drop the
information.
whole subject. Other than that, drop the whole subject. I know I'm not getting anywhere, and that's fine. But we don't have to go any further on this issue. I'm just bringing up some issues. We don't seem to agree on how to get there, but that's it. I just brought up the issue. So,
We'll be glad to provide you all the information we can.
I think you've gotten there.
okay, well, so let's just stop discussion.
Okay.
That's not fine. Yeah, thank you.
I support the governor's recommendation.
Thank you. Well, you don't carry this.
Committee, any further questions? Do the witnesses have anything to add?
We also support the governor's recommend of 300,000. The 1.4 million was added by the House.
Oh, wait a minute, so when you, Eric, when you said.
I wasn't speaking in code. I was,
Oh, so we don't have to do the 1.4? No. We can just
That is
do-
a negotiation between you and the House.
Oh, okay.
Well, what would happen if we didn't do the maintenance and upgrade the building
falls
here?
apart.
The building continues to deteriorate, right?
there's a lot of deferred maintenance on that building. It's good. It's our public base down there. So it'd be nice if we took care of it from a buildings perspective.
And that's the 1.4 million is that the upgrade?
How did the House, Eric, arrive at the 1.4 million? They must have had some data for somebody.
300,000 of it's for a grant program to other field days.
So the 1.07 million would be for major maintenance.
Yeah, and the
On the
330s, for the building at Biggie.
The 330,000 is for this modernization, concept design, engineering plan for renovation of the building into subsequent years. So that's the total of the 1.4 million in FY '23.
You're gonna call it free field days in Franklin County. That one building.
And I think some of the logic behind the appropriations moving together is as we make decisions about what we're going to fix where, how we're going to put it back together, it's going to drive decisions about how the building gets used going forward. Right now, it's 2 floors, no elevator. We've got ADA issues and like all kinds of things that are going to be triggered. It's one of those, once you make a clean spot, you really have to kind of play through. And so as we're changing out electrical systems and gas and plumbing and everything else in the building, we're also looking at what's the new layout going to be? What's a typical booth size going to be? What are the, we're reusing it. It's a combination of both, fixing critical systems, but also while we're tearing the place apart, we want to put it back together in a way that it's going to be more efficient going forward. And if we're talking about, changing the way we're operating our accounting systems and the like, then, that's something we need to keep in the back of our minds as we're setting up this facility.
Okay. So just go over the particular elements of that total sum again. Is how much for what?
I have to go back and look.
So 1.07 million is in major maintenance improvements, which includes a hot water distribution, kind of some of the electrical maintenance, which includes hot water, putting in new sinks and hoods that are required to meet the health department code requirements, and then focusing on the most critical structural and safety maintenance projects, which includes the roof replacement, repairs to the base of the cupola, some exterior wood trim work, and some replacement of the upper clear-story windows. So BGS has sort of identified that these are all the deferred maintenance needs of greatest import, and have the most structural concern. So identifying those as the primary focus for FY23.
And they are likely to get worse if neglected.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to show you a photo of what the right now, we have an actual hole from the outside of the building into the building where the exterior trim has fallen off, so just below the roof line, and is an actual open hole into the interior of the building. So those are some of the very critical structural repairs and major maintenance improvements that would be covered under this 1.07 million of the 1.4.
1.07 million. And there was another lower figure that you wanted just for ongoing operational.
The other, I'm not sure if the other item would be the 330,000, which is for, is that the number you were thinking of?
Yes.
Okay, so the 330,000 is actually to do an architectural and engineering design study to be able to determine what the larger renovation and modernization plan would be for the building going forward.
And then there would be probably another fairly large appropriation down the road based on that study.
And then I think the estimations are looking at like, $3 million in total renovation costs from 2025 through fiscal year 28.
But the 1.04, to use an analogy of my own life, is like discovering that I had supporting timbers that were rotting. And I was not in a position to pay for the repair. But I did it anyway because they were supporting timbers and they were rotting. So you do what you have to do. Is that a good
That's
analogy?
immediate. I wouldn't necessarily call it emergent, but it's also based on, again, like I said, we have to hire the Italian electricians to work on the Vatican. So the Massachusetts inspectors came in and identified deficiencies in the systems in the building that we do have to correct. And, I look at the planning for the next use of the building as if we're gonna correct these things, if we're gonna pull out the electrical, we ought to be thinking about what the next version of this building is gonna look like 5 years from now, so that when we put in the stove hoods and we put in the electrical outlets and the plumbing, that we're thinking about where this stuff's gonna land to suit future vendors.
Well,
It's really been kind of hodgepodge for 100 years or so.
well, we have a duty to the taxpayers to not spend their money irresponsibly, but I think we also have a duty to the taxpayers to take care of stuff they own. They own this building. All right, well, gentlemen,
Mr.
Anyone?
Chairperson, one
Yes.
last item. Senator Parent, I think I might have started talking before you came in, but on your spreadsheet, Section 5, Building Community Grants, line 54, agricultural capital projects, agricultural fair capital projects is level or funded at the request amount of 300,000. So just wanted to make it clear that there was money in there for our local fairs and field days.
Could we put language in there because it's competitive grant? I know it tends to be for capital, but obviously in Franklin County, we have an issue. And I know this committee doesn't want to spend any more for planning, but would they be able to apply for that funding to do some planning if they had to move their location?
So I'm happy to talk about it very briefly, Senator Parent. So in this current fiscal year, we received 10 capital fair and field day grant applications. The total application requests were for over $334,000. We had the same appropriation in FY22 as is being proposed for 23. So we had just under $300,000 to put out in grants. The way that statute is written is that the fair capital grants have to be invested in capital infrastructure projects that have at least a 20-year lifespan and require a 15% cash match from the recipient fair. So we did award a grant to Franklin County. And we just have for $26,000. And we just have a caveat in their agreement that they need to let us know once they get settled enough in where their location will be and what their capital infrastructure needs will be. And that $26,000 will be available to Franklin County.
Right, but they need the 50,000 to find a place to go and to do the Act 250 permitting likely and all that stuff. So I didn't know if we could change the language even for a year, instead of trying to find more money, allow them to apply that grant money that they've received, and maybe they get another 26,000 this year and apply that to the study and that work. Because if they find a place to do that work, they'll likely be there a lot longer than 20 years, but it's not a pure cut. I'm just trying to do it without costing more money. There's no support on the committee to throw more money in there for them, but maybe that's a way to kind of help them out.
Yeah, I think the challenge will be in the statutory language that created the program. So I don't know if Ledge Council or others would want to look at that with us, but I feel that provides us some restriction around how the 26,000 very specifically, but how the 300,000 annually can be invested.
I get it.
Is this discussion completed for the time? Witnesses, anything more to add? Thank you. Thank you for answering our questions. Thank you for your.
You're welcome. And I will be back in touch and share more information around the confirmation of how our commissions are collected and about the operating budget of the building. And appreciate the questions and look forward to having an ongoing conversation about it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
gentlemen.
Thank you. So committee, our chair has scheduled for us at 2:30 committee discussion. As opposed to what we would do.
Would I be able to convince you guys at all on a language change for that, in lieu of asking for more money?
What? What do you want to do?
And how Franklin County Field Days move? They have to move.
So what are you asking for?
Instead of, I brought up money a few weeks ago that didn't fly, I totally get it, but would we allow them to use the grant that they can apply for that money to do their planning?
They're a piece of the action 25, what they get 25?
They got 26, but they're not releasing it to it, but if they take last year's 26 and then this upcoming 26, that's the 50,000 effectively they need.
They didn't get last year's because they had no fair?
No, they didn't get last year's because the state of Vermont knows they're not gonna be there 20 years, so they didn't release the funds to them because we're moving them. So to me, instead of letting, she just said, that money's held till they find a place and then we'll give them the money to build it, but they can't.
What do you want to use the 50?
They need to find a piece of land and start the permitting process, like,
$50,000.
well, they asked for 200, but the governor agreed he would support 50,000.
And buying the land or just?
I think they have to get someone in to say like, you know, the soil, you know, can they put parking in here and do all, you know, they're gonna have to have someone do their.
Identify the beach, yeah.
They've got a couple, B-Trans also has a site that's not public, but maybe you guys know about that. I've talked to Secretary Flynn about that could potentially, there's 3 or 4 options. So I don't think we're paying anyone to go out and search for land. I think it's paying someone, here's our 3 options, which one's the best one for traffic and all that, because they're gonna have to probably go through Act 250, and that's not cheap. And I know people love Act 250, but you know, that's a cost. It's not, you know, so at least pay for some initial design planning on what the fair would look like. I mean, we wouldn't be asking for any more money. It's money that would already likely go to them. It's just,
You got 26 in reserve, and if you guys had one this year, would make up.
maybe we just have to change language to allow them to use that.
Yeah, I don't think that would be enough. If you want to sign language, we
Right.
gotta be careful about that.
Right. I don't, because I agree with why we have it built the way we do, but this is I don't think we're asking any other fair to move anytime soon. So to me, that could be a compromise without spending any more money,
It's a possibility, I think.
but just bend the rule a little bit.
Who is our drafter? If we want to make a change.
No,
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I'll talk to Brittany and the governor, see if he can go up too.
I think I would rather not preside over a vote. We'll wait.
No.
We'll have to do it.
No, I'm just asking, is it worth having Becky draft the language for me if you guys?
Yeah. Yes.
If you're gonna say no right off the bat, I won't do it.
No,
Just-
no, I'm-
Letters here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What is this? Like this is updated, this is from Dan today.
How do you feel about giving the eastern states the maintenance money and continuing to?
I'm good with the governor's recommend. That's all I'm good
At
with.
this point,
What'll that get done? On the building?
I'm not sure.
I'm certainly not, look at the $330,000 for one building to look at design and planning, 330,000. After we're putting 1.7 million or 1,770,000 for buildings. Wow. I mean, I know the building's a building, but Jesus, I would think a contractor could go in there and figure that one out pretty easily. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. There are state buildings over there, they love that, they love that.
You know, on a smaller scale, my son, who's a builder,
Yeah, you can figure that out. It would take $330,000.
people have architects, he goes with the architect's plans and he redoes them. If there's no architect, he designs something and they like it just
No,
as well.
the problem I have, and I'm not being, crazy about this, is we look at expenditure, which is fine, but we also have to look at, to pay it back, but are we up to date on, when we talk 3 years with no increase, 3 years of not knowing what they're doing cash wise, we're not interested in that. We know it's an obligation, we have a state building, yes. That's one of the things that bothers me in the fair group is all fairs, they have to assume what they turn in. There's no way of checking. And the food vendors, there's no way. They give us, I think it's Chamberlain Valley Fair, 22% or 20% or something of their sales.
So we do that again. I go back to snack bar, wasn't it? But our local hockey association, we put in a point of sale. We have volunteers run it, right? So like people literally at the end of the night before our sister would just throw money in a bag, stick it in a safe, and I'd count it and be like, yeah, that's exactly what's in this bag. But they didn't tell me how much they thought was in it or what they sold. But we put a point of sale in, and now we never did the change piece. We just did the bills. And it was always within a couple bucks. You know, it's not gonna be perfect, but at least in your mind, you knew we're probably. I think at the end of the year we had a plus minus of about $200, and I was like, you know what, on 40,000 sales, that's close enough with a bunch of volunteers. But at least we knew what we were expecting, and the nights all turned out to
We
be.
had the same vendor for 20 years. We changed vendors. The first vendor would come in every night at the end of the rides, would give us a bag of money on the desk. We take our percentage out, and that was it. We changed and went for the tickets, okay? First year, same volume, $80,000 we picked up. $80,000 for a 6-day fair.
And I'm not saying they're not, but human nature's human nature. I waited tables. We were supposed to write down how much we pulled in tips every night to pay taxes on. You think 16-year-old Corey, because it was before stat, I was, put down every dollar he pulled in tips. You know what I mean? It's the reality. You put enough to make it look believable, and then you moved on.
So what we got now, Mr. Chair, anything?
We have completed our
Okay.
agenda, so shall we adjourn?
Sure.
Alex?